You got to add that 1% to them. Those two things will get you through a lot. I've actually told one hockey player to retire because he was on his 7th concussion. And I look at his eye movements and I said, oh, these are awful. We can't go back to the ice. That extra 1% can make a huge, huge difference. Your eye tracking gets better. Everything gets better just from that one thing.
Would you recommend doing it in the morning, in the evening, or just whenever they have time? Welcome back to the NeuroVision Edge Podcast, where elite performance will meet science. And today's guest is Dr. Charles Shidlofsky, one of the most well-respected leaders in neuro-optometry and sports vision. And he currently is doing quite a bit of amazing things in sports vision, which some of you may have heard of, some of you may not have heard of. And so what he's been doing is he's been serving as a team vision consultant for the NHL Dallas Stars and the MLS FC Dallas team. Dr. Shidlofsky has spent over 3 decades refining how the brain and eyes work together, helping anyone from young adolescent with ADHD and eye tracking issues from youth levels and professionals gain that extra edge that makes that few milliseconds matter. He's also the clinical director of NeuroVision Associates in North Texas and has a whole host of other accolades that we will not get into. But today, what we will dive into is what truly separates an average athlete from an elite performer, and how your visual system impacts reaction time, decision-making, and even more important, injury risk. We want you to have a long career, and this is a key component. And so, Dr. Shidlofsky, can you just jump into it and give us an introduction? How did you even get started in sports? I know you had a busy practice with everything else.
Well, actually, sports vision was my first love in optometry school, going back to that. So, in fact, my 4th year project in optometry school was I worked with a college baseball team. And that was I actually did a study on which vision skills were conducive to the higher batting average. So I took a look at all the players who had the highest batting average versus the lowest batting average and see what skills they were the strongest at. So that was actually my 4th year study in optometry school. And I came out of school and I wanted to do sports vision. So I was basically started out in a small little tiny mall office type of setup. And I ended up meeting this guy, and he had a little league baseball team, and I started working with them. And interesting enough, I would start working with these kids, and I went out to the baseball field and worked with them a little bit, and their skills got better. They were a very competitive, young, 9-10-year-old team. In Texas, sports is everything, and it's like religion. So, it's like they wanted to be the best. And I worked with them. I did some stuff with them. But interesting enough, when I was doing the end of season evaluations on the players, parents would come to me and says, they did so much better on the field. Thank you so much. But you know what? They did better in school too.
Wow.
Okay. And that kind of hit me. Yeah. And so then shortly thereafter, I opened my first practice, and we started doing vision therapy and sports vision in that practice. So we had like a Wayne-Saccadic fixator. We started having the tools to do stuff like this, and I wanted to expand what we did, but got so busy with other stuff and realized also that I could help a lot of kids too. So I started doing that at that point in time, developmental vision and things of that nature, and I really got deep into that and started working with a lot of autistic kids, and so it was really kind of my joke is I'm kind of the accidental tourist. Accidental tourism took me everywhere that I went in my career, and so but sports vision was my first love, and that also led me to there used to be an organization called the International Academy of Sports Vision, and I went up to vice president of that before it folded around year 2000, if I remember correctly.
So when did you start?
Oh, I graduated in 1988. So
wow. Oh my God.
I've been doing this for a few days. And so the study I did was actually 1987. It was just before I graduated. And then ultimately, after International Academy of Sports Vision was gone, And then the American Optometry Association was going to disband the section, the sports vision section, and make it a committee. I sat down with some friends of mine and said, we need to create a sports vision association. So that's when we created the International Sports Vision Association.
So
Back 10
you were
years ago
one of,
now. I was one of the founders.
You were the founders. You were one of the founders.
Yes.
Okay.
It was myself and Dr. Alex Andrich and Dr. Jared Davies and Benoit Lambert, who's an optometrist in Belgium. We were sitting around having the conversation, and we started it. And we did our first meeting 10 years ago.
Wow.
And we're going to have our next meeting in probably January, February. We haven't selected a date yet. So we're really excited about starting that organization and getting it going. And just because our passion is helping the athletes become better athletes. And it's just that, I think it's kind of like that. You got to add that 1% to them. That's the difference. Right. Is the 1%. You're not going to try to change 50% of that person. It's getting down to that little tiniest aspect and get it a little bit better and improve that reaction time just a little bit. And that can make all the difference in the world between, playing at a lower level and a higher level.
So that's amazing. So you think the average and elite, the difference between the two are not that significant. Just making a few minor 1, maybe even 2% difference can be life-changing.
Exactly correct. And the other thing is, I'll tell parents this all the time. There's no substitute for two things in life: athletic ability and intelligence. Those two things will get you through a lot. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So I have kids who struggle with vision skills, but they're highly intelligent. So they perform well in school, but they could probably perform better if we make them better. Same thing with the athlete. Right. I have these guys that are on the verge. They're great. They have great athleticism and they have great skills. But there's that one little thing holding them back from getting to that next level. And this is where we can really make a huge impact.
That's amazing. So since you've worked with a lot of pro players, how do you figure out which players need that help? I know you do spring. Do you do like spring training things?
Yes. Like this past year, I worked with the Blue Jays. With Dr. Andrich and Dr. Davies, we worked with the Blue Jays this year. We worked with the Cleveland Indians before. Actually, this was my second stint with the Blue Jays. Worked with a little bit with the Texas Rangers organization. Usually their minor league ballpark is about 10 minutes from my office. So I worked with some of the minor league players there. And they brought some people in from deeper in the organization over to me, some minor leaguers and some young players that they brought in. Just to do evaluations. So, I think that's really what it comes down to is you get to work with these players. Pro players are pretty finicky. I actually almost prefer working with the minor leaguers over the major leaguers, to be honest with you, because the minor leaguers are they want to get to that next level. Right. The major leaguers have reached the pinnacle, so they think they know it all. So in a lot of ways, minor leaguers are actually easier to work with. Than some of these, high level pros. However,
sorry,
go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just saying it's like the thing that Michael Jordan's coach, right? I think it was Phil Jackson. He said what made Michael Jordan great was that he was coachable.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that's what it takes. You have to be coachable, number one. But I remember I worked with one of the Blue Jays players, and he was a very high level. He was an all-star. They had come to Texas for to play the Rangers, and they invited me to evaluate 6 of their players. So I went in and did the evaluation in the basement of the ballpark in Arlington. And one of the players, who was an all-star, his edge was he was so competitive, okay, that when we had the synaptic out there and they were doing the synaptic, I got to beat a score. That was his thing, Sometimes it's pretty funny when you see that. So it's like, and then some of these guys are just kind of laid back. Let's just move on. And let me, like the goalie for the goalie for FC Dallas. He's another one. It's like, he got so frustrated doing like a reflection board because he just couldn't beat some of the other guys' scores, and he was a top level goalie. So it's kind of funny to watch some of these guys and how they react when they're playing at a high level sport. But some of them just say, "I don't want to do it. I know everything," and that's how it goes.
and you can only coach who wants to be coached, right? So,
Exactly.
so when you deal with these pro level athletes, let's say NHL, for example. So when you're with the Dallas Stars, what does that training look like? And is it different for every position, or are we doing similar training for everyone? What does it look like from your perspective?
Well, so kind of the Dallas Star story is kind of interesting because I set up a training system for them back in 2019, and we just started. I was virtually just about to 2020. It was almost like November, December 2019. And I set up the whole training program and everything like that. And then what happened? COVID hit, right?
Oh man,
So,
yeah,
so they had these tools. We got we had the old Wayne Saccadic fixators hanging up in there, and I started teaching the physical therapists there how to work with the players with it. And it was going to be a great thing, and then it died. And then we didn't really work with them for the next 2 seasons because they were under COVID restrictions. And so finally this year they called us, and we actually did the preseason screening for the team.
okay,
So they invited us in. They had someone that was doing it prior to me, but they invited us in to do the preseason screening. And so we did the screening, and I sent the reports to the athletic trainer, and I said, "Here's who I'd like to see for further evaluation." But unfortunately, we got such a late start this year. We didn't actually end up seeing many players at all. But I would love to, and they had a new physical therapist, as I was mentioning to you. They had a new physician who was just kind of learning the ropes this year. So I'm hoping we'll do more with them next year, and be able to really expand our program with them. As I said, these guys are on the road a lot. So getting them to comply with the program is really, really challenging. We do the best we can to get them in. Where I've seen many of the athletes that I've seen, where I've seen them the most is when they get concussions, because then they don't have answers. And all these sports teams are really, really concerned about concussion. It's kind of a really sore point. And, some people are hyperreactive to it. Some people are hyporeactive to it. But the point is, when they have a concussion patient and they send them to the neuropsych, and the neuropsych says, "Okay, we're okay," but they probably need a vision eval, and then they'll send them over to me, and then I can see where they need to go. And I've seen several of the players over the years who've had concussions. One of my favorite stories is there's another minor league hockey team here in town called the Allen Americans. And I had worked with them for 8 or 9 seasons. And they sent me over. They had a guy that got a concussion, and, the neuropsychologist saw him. And what ended up happening was the neuropsychologist was ready to clear him. He passed his impact test, so he was ready to return to play. But he said, I looked at his eye movements. I'm not so sure about. Will you take a look at him? So they sent him over to me that afternoon, and I look at his eye movements, and I said, "Oh, these are awful. We can't go back to the ice." Then I actually measured his balance, and he was a fall risk.
oh no,
And I said, "You can't put a guy on ice skates who's a fall risk." And even though he passed the cognitive test, okay, he was not ready to go back on skates. So I had to call the team doctor up, which I took hell for 3 years on the same story, because he didn't like the fact that I said, "No, he's not ready to return to the ice."
Yeah.
But interesting enough, we had done a baseline study with them, prior to the season. So I knew what his baseline was. And I said, "Here was his baseline. Here's where he is today. Would you put him back on the ice?" Okay. And ultimately, I did like only 5 sessions of therapy, and he was almost back to his baseline. But I said, when I completed his therapy after about 12 sessions, he was above his baseline score. So I said, now he's ready to come back. Of course, it was too late then, because the playoffs were already started. He was off the roster. But that's a different story. But sometimes you have to just tell him, "Hey, this guy is not ready to come back." And sometimes the coaches don't like that too well. But you have to be honest with them and be straightforward with them. I've actually told one hockey player to retire because he was on his 7th concussion. And he was on his 7th concussion. And I said to him, you're in the ECHL, you're getting paid $20,000 a year plus housing. You're just got married. I said, go enjoy life. I said, the concussions are just not worth it.
Wow.
to where you have to deal with stuff later on.
No, it could take away your life. I mean,
Mhm.
you've seen so many patients with concussions who don't drive, don't work. I mean, forget hockey; they can't even function in daily life.
So
It's
true.
crazy.
So true. Absolutely.
That's amazing. So the having that baseline score, that's obviously a huge benefit because you can compare to what they were before. But let's say we're trying to get a high school or JUCO player who is really good but is having trouble getting to the next level. How would you tell if they're having issues with possible eye movement issue or just not ready because of other issues, mental, cognitive issues, or even just maybe not able to reach that next level?
You have that player who is the JUCO player and who wants to get to that next level. And the real thing you have to do is you have to hit their emotional system. You have to make it emotional, okay? Because they want to. You just have to make them understand why they want it, you know, to some degree. Um, and the easiest way to do that is diagnostic testing. Okay,
Okay.
so you put them on the synaptic sensory station and you run through, and here's what's no- so. And the cool thing on the synaptic sensory station is you can say, okay, I'm a junior college football player. I play defensive tackle, and you put that in there. Okay, and I want to go play for the University of Texas. All
Yeah.
right. So here's where a Division I college football player is, and you put that in there and you say, okay, here's where you are. Here's where average Division I football player at your position is.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to get there, we got to get you at least average. Okay. And you can demonstrate something like that. When you do the right eye test, there's a sports vision component of the right eye test, and you run them through the sports vision thing, and you can see they get gold medal, silver medal, or bronze medal, and you could show them, hey, you have a bronze here and a silver here, but a gold here. We need to take this silver and the bronze and bring it up to a gold if we can.
Yeah.
So there are definitely you have to kind of be able to show them data to say, okay, here's where you are, here's where we want to be,
Yeah.
and that's going to help you get to the next level. But some of them still just don't jump into it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For some people, it's like they'll pay, $150 a session for a coach to help them with batting, okay, but they won't come in for a therapy session to work on their visual system. So that's why you have to convince, that's why you have to show them data and say, here's what we need to do with your visual system. This is why, the I said the batting coach can work all they want on your mechanics, okay, of batting, okay. But if you're not tracking the ball, it's not going to make a difference.
No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, batting in general is such a difficult thing that, I mean, we're talking, less than milliseconds sometimes when it comes
Mhm.
to making that decision, that if your eyes are even a little bit out of sync, that's going to create a huge issue for you and super inconsistent. You can't be consistent. What would you do, like when you do an evaluation for a soccer player and you do a hockey player? Can you break down the skills that a hockey player needs versus what the skills a soccer player needs when it comes to the neurovisual system?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question, only because they're very similar games. And if
Okay.
you have two goals at the end of the field or the end of the ice, you have players passing, working in triangles to pass the puck. But there's some rule differences. But, in soccer, for instance, one of the things you can think about is um, one of the big skills you're looking to do is draw them off sides, right?
Yeah.
And that spatial vision that you need in that wide field to draw them off sides and knowing and actually creating your angles correctly requires really, really good visual skills. So this is so I'll use that as an example. Drawing them off sides is a great example of it because you have to use your visual skills to know where the ball is, where the players are, and so you can create that effect. Obviously the shooting part is that's an athletic skill, but also passing is also a very similar skill between the two sports. So I like to think it's similar. Obviously, with the goalies, it's a little different because in soccer it's a huge goal, and they have much fewer shots on goal during the game, right? They may deal with 5 shots the whole game.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas hockey goalies are dealing with 25 to 45 shots a game. Much smaller goal, but once again, the puck moves a lot faster than a soccer ball, and it's much smaller. Right. Yeah. So different skill set, same skill sets, but different animal between the two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense.
So you have to do it, and while you don't have to deal with as wide of a surface in hockey as you do in soccer, the game is moving at a much faster pace, a much higher speed. So we have to account for that speed, because some of these skaters are skating 20, 21, 25 miles per hour. Okay.
Wow.
And when they're moving that fast and they're having to catch a puck on a stick at 25 miles per hour, that requires great visual skills, big visualization, and also great spatial vision, because you know where you are in space. Because in hockey, if you catch a puck and your head's down, what's going to happen? You're going to get a shoulder to the body, and you're going to be into the boards, right? So once again, different vision skills in the sport, but if you think about it, same basic game, so a lot of the same skill sets, but at different speeds. So you have to change your approach to training them. Obviously, you're going to have to deal with more high level speed and high level awareness in hockey. And with soccer, more spatial. Right. So that's just a good example of it.
Okay. So how would someone know, like, if, let's say you're a parent, right, and you have a kid, you started with 8, 9-year-olds, which I feel like right now with what we're seeing, even across the whole U.S., we have a lot 8, 9-year-olds that are training already for a sport, right? They're specializing in a sport at an early age. So if you were that parent and you were watching your kid and you notice they're not progressing as well, how would they know, by either looking at them or maybe even doing a drill, that vision might be holding them back and they've had a normal eye exam?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, normal eye exams usually don't really cover the territory for this, but there's some very simple, easy things that they can do. And in fact, it's the same thing I teach the school nurses who are doing the vision evals. I said, if you add 2 tests to your vision eval, you would identify the right people who really need vision evaluations. Because if you just do an acuity test, you haven't really, you can see if they're nearsighted. And you may not find out if they're farsighted for sure, because the most farsighted kids that are young can see. But if you just added tracking, right? Okay. Follow this object and watch their eyes. If their head's moving like this, they've got a problem, right? So let's do some tracking activity and then converge.
Okay.
And, I'll tell them to get a spoon and just look at the back of the spoon, the reflection in the back of the spoon, have them track it, then have them converge. If we did that, we'd find so many more kids who are having difficulty in school, number one.
Okay.
But we also can use the same logic in saying, okay, my kids out and their tracking is not very good because they can't separate their head and eye movement.
Right. So I'm just going to demonstrate it really fast, just to make sure other people are doing it the right way. But before I do that, you mentioned acuity. So acuity meaning how well can they see far or close, right? Nearsighted,
that's
farsighted.
Correct, yes.
So that's more of the glasses part. That's where the vision exam would come into play. Now, a lot of these extra tests, the tests, that we're doing that are more involved with sports performance, that's something that you would be doing like a full longer evaluation for. Is that
exactly.
correct? Okay.
Yeah, and of course, don't forget, even with acuity, when we're dealing with that sharpness of vision, a lot of the baseball players I saw at the Blue Jays camp this year, they were 2015 vision or better. I mean, they have incredible visual acuity. Most people think 20/20 is perfect vision. It's not. It's average vision. Okay.
Yeah. But you can shout that again.
That's what it requires, that extreme sharpness of vision to be able to, whether it's corrected or not corrected, to see it. Then there's also the environment of the field, right? So in different settings, you have different environmental needs. And so a lot of times I can use tinted contact lenses to enhance the ball with the ball for them, or tinted lenses for glasses if they don't want to wear contact lenses. So there's so much we can do now to help the athlete enhance their game with that. I also am a big believer in utilizing supplements for them. So,
Oh,
like
really?
for supplementing lutein and zeaxanthin, we think of it for macular degeneration, but there's several studies with baseball players actually that show that lutein and zeaxanthin given to a young athlete will actually improve their contrast and the
Wow.
macular because it's improving that macular pigment density. Okay, so it's actually going to improve that contrast system and the sharpness of their vision. So using a product, even an AREDS product, can really help even a young person. We always think of it for macular degeneration, but we need to be thinking about
Right.
it. So I put a lot of my athletes on it. I actually have a couple SWAT officers that have come to see me, and they're using it also because
So,
they need that extra sharp vision.
so let's say we have a parent. They notice their child is struggling with nighttime games, the Friday night lights. They're having issues with that. But daytime, they seem to be doing well. Then would you recommend that they start taking lutein and zeaxanthin, or would they
Absolutely.
need a eye exam with a sports vision doctor and also get tested for maybe a contrast sensitivity contact lens to enhance that that vision at nighttime or dim settings?
I'd say all of the above.
All of the
Um,
above. Okay.
all of the above. The first and foremost, before you start taking any type of supplement, you should see a doctor, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure you're taking the right thing. It's the right thing for you. And there's different ways you can do measurements and things of that nature. But you should do a good vision eval. Um, if they're specifically interested in sports, you should go to a sports vision doctor. And you could go to the International Sports Vision website, association website, and there's a list of doctors on there, which is sportsvision.pro is the website. And you can go on that website, and you can actually find a doctor nearby you.
And I'll link that down below just so everyone has an easy time finding that.
Yeah. So obviously, if sports is what you're interested in, that's the best thing to do is find someone who knows what they're doing,
Right.
um, get an evaluation, and if they're worth their weight in anything, they're gonna say, okay, we did this, this, and this. Here's your visual acuity. We can fit a contact for this. Here is your you're having trouble with glare. We can deal with it this way. You're having trouble with tracking. We can deal with it this way. And figure out all the pieces of the puzzle, and then start putting the pieces together.
And I guess that's the key, right? Is to figure out what is holding you back. And I think a lot of athletes and even parents have a hard time figuring out what is the factor that's holding them back, because they're putting in the effort, they're doing all the work, but they're still not at the level that they thought they could be. That potential's not being met. So
Right.
you mentioned this test, which, while we're at it, I'll just demonstrate it. So we're doing a pursuit, like following test, going this way, then to the other side. And if they're moving their head, making any sort of compensation, then we know something's off. And then we're doing
Or if it even looks jerky,
or if it
they're
looks jerky.
not moving the ice smoothly. That's also an indication of it.
And then you mentioned the pencil push-up, so we're doing some convergence and back. And if we notice that the eyes aren't moving together like this and smoothly back, it's jerky, or if one eye's not turning in, then we know there might be some issues that are definitely affecting academics and also sports. But what are some other ways that you would pick up on some cues that there might be something there?
Um, you have that player who has a lot of athletic skill, and say they're a basketball player. We'll throw out another sport here.
Okay.
Okay, you're a basketball player. You're dribbling down the court, and you have a great shot, and you shoot it, and you score a lot, right? But as soon as players come and guard you, you panic, and you don't know how to deal with it. Okay, or
Okay.
you're looking for that. There's a player wide open, and you could pass it to them, and you decide, well, and I got someone guarding me straight in front of me, and so the pass would be the right call, but you don't pass it because you don't know where that person is.
Oh no.
Okay,
Yeah.
that spatial aspect becomes affected, where you should be aware of, hey, that person's over here. I'm going to toss the ball over here. Okay, to that other player, and they have an easy layup. Okay, but instead I'm going to drive the basket and try to go through this other guy. That's going to be a sign that, and if you do it consistently, that's a sign. Hey, I'm not using my awareness of space to figure out. I have another player who has an easy shot. Sometimes the
Right.
people are just not being a team player, but other times but I said consistency is really the key here. You want them to be able to pick out other players, make the good pass if they need to, and then I think half the battle in sports is figuring out what to do when you don't have the ball.
Right.
Put
Yeah.
yourself in the right position to receive a pass. And a lot of people, no, not a lot of people talk about that, but that's a huge part of sports, is to know where to be able to be in a position to receive something.
Yeah, that's obviously self-awareness, but also visualization, right? Because they're visualizing where their teammate's going to be. Well, where should I be to get that pass and make it easier to make that easy point rather than, force a shot? That type of deal.
So that's another way a parent can certainly look at things and say, hey, he's a great player, but he's not using his teammates in the right way. And
Right.
that can be just as strong a signal as anything else.
So they just have to watch out for these signals, and that can give them the cue that they need. Um, Before we, close up, I wanted to ask you if there's one habit that you can recommend every athlete. Like, think of the athletes that you see right now. If there's one habit that you can tell them, like, this is what I want you to do daily, that would have the biggest impact on their performance, what do you think it would be? What would you recommend?
Well, I'll give you the old, what was it? I forgot who it was, Joe DiMaggio or Ted Williams, one of the old baseball players. He used to walk down the street and in the town he lived in, and this is back in the 30s and the 40s, right? And he would try to use his side vision to be able to see the things in the store windows. Okay,
Okay.
and he was one of the best hitters of all time, right?
Right.
And that's because he had great peripheral vision. So I tell people, look at something, hard focus on something, and then soften their focus and try to be aware of everything around them and be aware of their whole space. Because our system, I'll give you an example. You're playing tennis and you're waiting for a ball. What do you see? The net, the lines, the player you're playing against, and the ball. But when you chase hard after a ball, what do you see? Just the ball,
Right.
right? So what you're doing is you're collapsing that space. And then you have to get ready to get the next shot. You have to open it back up. The collapse of space is actually a natural response to visual stress, okay? It's how well you can open it back up to get ready for the next play. That's going to determine your success and your failure a lot of times. So that's why I say focus on learning how to control that central peripheral aspect. And I think that is a real key to success. And it's actually one of the things that is not talked about a whole lot. But one of the first things I try to train is what I call visual vestibular grounding. And that is knowing where I am in space and opening up our periphery.
Yeah. I mean, if they can do just that. And so since this is like a daily habit, would you recommend doing it in the morning, in the evening, or just whenever they have time?
I've told many kids before, it's kind of interesting is you can practice it consciously in the morning, let's say. Morning, your eyes are fresher. It's easier to work with and things like that. But most sports are played in the evening, right?
Yeah.
So it's also good to it's really even better to practice in the evening. But even that kid who's trying to get better, but they're all going to come sit home and play video games, right? Or they're going to watch TV or something of that
Oh
nature.
God.
So
Yeah.
I say to them, look at when you're watching TV during the commercial, look straight at the TV screen, but try to be aware of everything in the room with your periphery.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's better than watching the commercial anyway.
Right.
You understand my point? is
Yeah.
there's things they can do consciously to practice, and it doesn't have to be a regimented practice, but it could be, say, okay, commercial's on. I'm going to really focus on the screen. Now I'm going to open up my periphery and try to focus on things outside of the periphery, outside in my periphery.
Right.
And so I said, that's the very first thing I practice. Because if you can open up your periphery and really train that skill, all the other pieces fall. Your eye tracking gets better. Everything gets better just from that one thing.
Right.
Because that's how our brain learns, okay, to move things through space. You can't have a good saccadic eye movement without open space.
Yeah, because if you don't know, if your peripheral vision is collapsed, then you don't know where to go. So your peripheral vision has to be open. That way you can make that movement so you already know where you're going. So that's wonderful. So if, let's say I'm watching TV, now I'm going to hard focus, let's say on your nose right now. So I'm hard focusing, I'm just putting all that visual stress in the middle. And now I'm relaxing and trying to open up and try to notice as far out as I can see, and then go back to it, go back and forth. If we can do that, let's say 10 times a day, I mean, that could reap so many benefits, even
Absolutely.
for academics, right? I mean, that could help you read.
And it's simplistic, right?
Yeah.
We don't think about it, but it's a skill. And it's such a simplistic skill that anyone can do it. I mean, as you know, I see a lot of brain injury patients too. I teach it to my brain injury patients because they're collapsed all the time.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And I teach that to them. That's the first thing I teach them. I said, when you're sitting in your room, okay, in the hospital, and you're watching TV, that's what I tell them to do. It's the most basic foundational skill we have, okay, to be able to move through space.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, then tracking and everything gets better.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. I love that. And I feel like if you guys take away anything from this, just do this activity every day and you will reap benefits, whether it's reading, driving, playing sports, even walking and avoiding injury. I mean, this could be any age group, right? This is
even for the older person, avoiding falls.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
falls is a huge problem, right? Falling is one of the highest causes of injury for elderly people. So if they can work on opening up their space, the rate of falling goes down significantly.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time today. If people wanted to find you and learn more about sports vision, or even if they've had friends who've had concussions or brain injury and want your expertise, where would they reach out to you?
Well, my website is neurovisionassociates.com. So that's an easy way to do it. I already mentioned the sportsvision.pro, which is really more the International Sports Vision Association's website. And they have a lot of people involved in sports vision on that website. And you can get some really good information on sports vision there. But as I said, we do have great information on our website on sports vision. But as I said, feel free to reach out to me. My office number is 972-312-0177. You can reach us that way. Also, if you have questions, but certainly, as I said, the websites are probably the easiest way to get rapid information.
Okay. And I'll link all of that down below. So if anyone wants to reach out to Dr. Shidlofsky, then you guys can easily directly contact him. I just want to quickly summarize a few takeaways because there was a lot of good information here. And I feel like if we can have some athletes act upon these, then it can just, that 1% change can make such a big difference in their lives. So the lutein and the zeaxanthin, if we're having trouble with the contrast sensitivity, meaning if you're having trouble playing in dim environments and you notice your game slightly is tougher in that situation, then that would be a good supplement to start, and then see a sports vision doctor with that linked down below with the International Vision Sports Association. There was another few that were really good about the eye exercises. So the eye exercises, the tests, you can go back, I'll link and put chapters on each section so you can go back and find that exercise. And then the last one we talked about opening up the peripheral vision, the hard and then the soft focus, and just noticing when you need to do that and feeling like you can control that. If you can just take away those three things, I think this is going to get you that extra 1% edge you're looking for. Anything else you would like to add, Dr. Shidlofsky?
No, thank you for giving me this forum to talk about this because this is a lot of fun stuff. For me, as I said, sports vision's been a passion of mine for 35 years in practice, and I love also the opportunity to teach younger doctors more about it as well. And but also, it's important for the general public to know that there is something out there that can give you that edge. This is all about that edge, okay?
Right.
And if you can utilize some of these things to gain an edge, and you can work with a sports vision doctor to gain that edge, that, as you mentioned, that extra 1% can make a huge difference between lower level and a higher level. I had a hockey player who came to see me once, and he was referred to me for a concussion, but I found out he was amblyopic. He had a lazy eye.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. And he was a second-round draft pick of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Okay.
Wow. And
so he was a very high-level player, but he was playing in the CHL, the Central Hockey League at the time, for the Allen Americans team. And the difference is if he got to the so the CHL, they were making $20,000 a year. The AHL, which is the next level up, they make about $80,000 a year. And the NHL, they make $2 million a year.
Huge difference.
I said to him, I wish I got him as a kid. Could have worked on his amblyopia instead of working on his concussion, because he just didn't have any depth perception. And yet he was so well regarded as an athlete. So to me, that's a huge thing. And so, especially with the younger kids, if we can get them younger, we can figure out what's going on with their visual system. It gives them a much better chance in the future to reach the level they would like to reach.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway message. Once again, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.